Hello, my most amazing artists, and welcome back to our final week of our Mary Blair castles. So far during this project, we have learned all about the artist Mary Blair. Remember, she worked for Disney. She did a lot of the design concepts behind older Disney movies like Peter Pan and Cinderella. She also did the designs for It's a Small World, that's a ride in Disney World. So she's very well known for that. We have been working really hard on finishing up our coleographs. The first week, we cut out our building shapes and our rooftop shapes, and we glued those down. The second week, we focused on just cutting out a bunch of different geometric shapes. And last week, we were able to arrange them on our coleograph, create the composition. So now we are ready to do our rubbing, which is the most exciting part of this project. This is what a rubbing looks like, and I'm going to show you how to do this today. So as you can see all of the shapes that I put onto my coleograph. And what's cool about this technique is that you only have to make one coleograph, and from this one coleograph you can make a bunch of different rubbings, experimenting with whatever kinds of colors you want to. So it's a lot of fun. Once you have this made, you can make as many rubbings as you want to. So to create your rubbings, of course, you will need your finished coleograph. You'll need some paper to do your rubbings, and you'll need some crayons that do not have wrappers on them. So to get the wrappers off of my crayons, all I did was I just took a variety of colors, a bunch of different colors, and I put them in a pot and I soaked them in warm water overnight. When I woke up the next morning, all the wrappers had basically fallen off and I was ready to go. So you can do this to all of your crayons, or you can just select whatever colors you want to do your rubbings in. And we need to take the wrappers off of our crayons because with a rubbing, you have to use the side of the crayon. Normally, when you're coloring, you use the top of the crayon, but when you're creating a rubbing, we are going to use this side. And of course, if the wrapper was still on this, we wouldn't be able to do it. So we gotta take the wrappers off of our crayons first. And when I do rubbings, I like to have a little bit of tape handy just so I can tape my paper down in place, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So you also might need some tape. I'm super excited to get started on these rubbings with you guys, but before we do get started, let's go ahead and say our class mantra all together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. My mantra: I am positive, I am creative, I am mindful, I am amazing, I am an artist. All right guys, let's go ahead and get started. So today I am just gonna do 2 rubbings. So I just have 2 brand new pieces of paper, and since this is new paper, of course I need to write my name on the back of each of them. Once I have written my name, I can flip my paper over, so now my name is on the back of both of these pieces of paper. But I'm just gonna use one piece at a time, and I also have my coleograph here. And what I want to do with my coleograph is I am just going to take some tape, and I want to tape it down so that it doesn't move around, because we are creating what is called a rubbing, and you can do that with crayons, you could do it with oil pastels, whatever you have. But whenever you do a rubbing, your coleograph and your paper usually want to move around a lot. So I don't want mine to move around, so I am just going to tape it in place. Doesn't really matter how many times you tape it. We don't really need to tape it that much. I'm just going to tape one on the top and bottom and the left and the right side. So I think my coleograph is secure now, and I'm going to take my first piece of paper. Okay, we want our name to stay on the back because our rubbing is going to show up on the front. So front side upwards, I am going to tape my piece of paper down now. I just did one piece of tape here at the top, and I'll do one more down here at the bottom. Okay, this is not necessary, but it will be very helpful when you start doing your rubbing. Okay, once you have it all taped down, we can now choose a crayon. These crayons do not have the wrappers on them because we are going to use the side of our crayon to do our rubbing. And let's see. I think I want to try this color first. You don't really need a long crayon like that. I actually prefer if my crayons are a little bit shorter because they're a little bit easier to control. I'm going to take the side of my crayon here. We don't want to use this side because then it will be very harsh. We want to use the side of our crayon because we can cover a lot of area at once. And I am just going to rub my crayon very lightly over the surface of my paper. And you can kind of start to see some of those beautiful shapes showing up. And I want to do this very light at first. I am barely pressing down at all. I just want to do a very light coverage at first, and then we're going to go in and press down a little bit harder. And I am filling up my whole entire paper with this color. Doesn't really matter what color you choose, but we're just going to stick with one color for each piece of paper. Alright, now I have my whole paper covered in my crayon here, and I can kind of start to see my shapes appearing. But to make them show up even more, we just have to press down a little bit harder. And my camera really wants to shake as I'm doing this, but I don't want it to make anybody sick. So what I'm gonna do is I am just pressing down a little bit harder on these areas to make my shapes show up a little bit more. As you can see over here, as I'm pressing down harder, my color gets darker and my shapes start to show up a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through all of my castles just very carefully, pressing down a little bit harder with the side of my crayon. But I'm gonna skip this part so you guys won't see it because I don't want my camera to be shaking like crazy. So yeah, all I'm doing is going over each and every part of my coleograph. And I'm very happy that I taped my coleograph down and my piece of paper down, or else it would be wanting to move all over my table. So taping it is very helpful if you're able to do that. Alright, so here is 2 layers. I went over it once very lightly. Then on the second time, I did it a little bit harder. I pressed down a little bit harder. Now we're gonna go over it one more time, a third time. The last time we'll go over it, and I'm gonna press down even harder. Now I'm not like bearing down on it, like putting my whole weight on it or anything. I'm just using my fingers and pushing down a little bit harder because I want to be able to see my buildings a little bit more. But as you can see, they're showing up really well and it looks super cool. But we're going to go over it one more time in the same color, and we're just going to press down a little bit harder. Sometimes shapes will not show up if you're just going up and down. So if a shape isn't showing up very well, try going from side to side instead. Okay, you can play around with the different directions that you do your rubbing in. Mostly I've been going up and down, but I tried going side to side down here and the little heart showed up even more. So try going up and down, side to side, even diagonal, whichever way to get your shapes to show up. All right, and there is my very first print, my first rubbing from this coleograph. And if I do say so myself, it is looking pretty cool. After you get done, you can just take that tape off, and my paper is wanting to rip a little bit, so just be super careful when you take the tape off. And there you go. Isn't that beautiful? What's cool about this is that you can do as many rubbings as you want to from this one coleograph that we made. So if you wanted, you could do like 10 of these, 15 of these. I'm just going to show you 2, but really you could keep this coleograph forever and just make a bunch of rubbings from it. And every time you create a rubbing, you can change your color. So this one, I just chose pink, but maybe for the next one, I want to do blue or purple or green. Totally up to you. So I'm just going to show you one more time. And every time you put a piece of paper down, we're just going to tape it down to make sure it doesn't move around. Remember, this step is optional, but it's very helpful while creating your rubbing. and I just did 2 pieces of tape at the top and the bottom. Once your paper is nice and secure, we are going to take another color, whatever color you want, or you could do the same color again if you want to. And remember, when we first start out, we're going to be very light with it. I'm barely pressing down at all, just a light coating over my whole paper. And some of my shapes might start showing up, but more than likely you won't be able to see most of your shapes during this first layer. Okay, and I'm just going over it a couple times. And I'll go in both directions this time. Last time I just went up and down, but I learned while creating my last rubbing that I can also go side to side. And after your first layer, you probably can barely see it because I'm using a light green, but after your first layer of being very gentle, barely pressing down at all, we're going to go back in and start pressing down a little bit harder. And as you can see, some of my shapes are starting to show up a lot better. I'm going to go over all of my castles, all my buildings and shapes a little bit harder, and then I'll be right back to share the next step with you. Alright, those shapes are showing up a lot better, but I think they could show up a little bit more. So for the last time and the third time, we are going to use our crayon in the same color, and I'm going to go over it one more time a little bit harder. I can put down a little bit more pressure this time. Oops, shaking my camera around again. I can start pressing down a little bit harder, going in different directions to make sure all of my shapes and details are showing up. Also, on my third time when I'm going over it, I'm kind of going over all the areas a few times. So like, for example, I'm not seeing this very well, so I'm going to go over it a few times in a bunch of different directions to make sure that it is showing up as much as it can. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that coverage, so now I am just going to peel up my tape because I don't need it anymore, gently, and there is another rubbing. I also did one off camera in a beautiful purple color, so you guys can really have lots of fun with your color choices and how many rubbings you do. You can do as many as you want to, but I want you to do at least 2 for me, okay? Do at least 2 rubbings, and every single time you'll get better and better. You'll be able to press down, you'll be able to see which areas need to be covered more, maybe which areas you need to press down a little bit harder. This was my first one, and it is a lot less detailed than this one and this one. So each time you'll get better and better with your prints. And like I said earlier, you can keep this collagraph and use it whenever you want to make a beautiful rubbing. You could put 2 colors in one rubbing. You don't have to do just one whole paper as pink. Maybe you want some pink areas, some purple areas. You can really experiment with your rubbings and what colors you use. I hope you guys learned a lot during this project. We learned all about Mary Blair, printmaking, what a collagraph is, what a rubbing is, geometric shapes. Oh my goodness, we have learned so much during this project, and I hope you guys have had a lot of fun so far. I can't wait to see how your rubbings turn out. I know they're going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.